Hello folks, Reginald Scott here, and just going to try and do a quick video all about clamping your bicycle and suspending your bicycle from bike stands, and a little bit of advice on that. I'm going to try and make this video as quick as I can because I have a very bad habit of waffling on, and I do notice people really do like some of my shorter videos. So here goes me trying to explain this in the least complicated way I can. So, you may have heard many people say, never clamp the top tube of your bicycle, especially if it's carbon fiber or lightweight aluminium. Never clamp it by the top tube, okay? Because you run the risk of damaging the frame. That's absolutely true. You can indeed damage your top tube of your bicycle, whether it be carbon fiber or lightweight aluminium, if you put too much clamping force onto the top tube. So firstly, how should you use a bike stand like this to clamp your frame? Now normally what you should do is clamp it on the seat post over here. But there's two issues with that. Where I work in Brunei, a lot of the bikes, because we're in Southeast Asia, a lot of the bikes are actually a lot shorter than people from, say, for example, the West or the UK, where people tend to be quite tall. For example, the average height of my UK customers means that they tend to ride 56s and 58 size frames, that being the top tube length. My average Bruneian customer rides 50 and 52. So you can see there's a really big difference there between the heights of the two groups of people. And as a result of that, because the majority of my customers are Bruneian, not expats, we tend to be unable to physically clamp the bike here because the seat tubes are too small, and we either don't want to remove the seat tube because we don't want to mess with the person's bike fit, or two, we don't have time, or three, the seat post sometimes is stuck inside the frame anyway, and it would just be more charging to the customer and more of a job that they just don't want doing to their bike. So for the requirement of speed, because if we're just doing something simple like a bike wash, you know, we don't really need to be doing all that complicated work on their seat tube. We clamp the bikes on here. Okay, so that's the first thing. You should always try and clamp your bike here on the seat post if you have a removable seat post, because if you break your removable seat post, it's going to be relatively inexpensive to replace, but if you break your frame, it's going to cost you several $1,000s sometimes. Now, as I say, this one here has an integrated seat post, which is actually part of the monocoque design of the frame or construction of the frame. So it's completely ridiculous, because even if I do clamp the seat post clamp here, sorry, the clamp for the bike stand around the seat post, I'm still putting enormous strain on this junction, this joint here, and I can potentially break that or damage that, and then that's bye-bye to the frame. You know, if I applied any force at all to the bottom bracket, I could potentially break the bike frame. So I have to, as a result of that, clamp the bike here. Now, what are the rules for clamping the bike here if you can't clamp it here? Well, the rules are, number one, be very careful about what kind of servicing and work that you're going to be doing to your bike. If you have to do things like washing, light gear cabling changing, maybe even dropping the fork out, checking the headset, gear tuning, for example, it's all perfectly acceptable to do it here and clamp the top tube with the frame. Okay, that's my first point. If you have to do anything heavy duty, that means bottom bracket removal, pedal removal, crank removal, or anything that's stuck or bonded to the bike that needs a significant amount of force to remove it, there are two things you can do. Number one, put the bike on the ground and use a bike stand like that or a bike stand like that, so that the force is spread out on the ground when you start to apply force to, say, for example, the pedals or whatever, to get an old rusty stuck pedal out of the bike. You're not then putting additional strain on the frame. Never ever do that kind of work with the bike clamped here, because you will damage something. And even if you don't know whether you've damaged anything or not, because carbon fiber can delaminate internally and not even tell you, so that's really dangerous. If you have to do any BB bottom bracket work or anything that's going to require a large amount of force to be applied to the bicycle, then I sincerely recommend you get yourself one of these, which is the bike stand designed to cradle the bottom bracket here and the fork at this end, or you can actually invert it like I have recently. I've obviously been doing it myself, which is you can clamp the back triangle via the dropouts here, and again the BB will sit here, but your fork will be dangling down the front, and then you can do fork work as well. So this supports the bottom bracket, which allows you to put pressure on the bottom bracket to remove it if you need to do that. So first rule basically is clamp here if you can. If you can't, you can clamp here, but be very wary about the kind of servicing and work you're going to be doing to your bike. I know a lot of bike shops locally here doing tire services with their customers' bikes clamped here, and honestly it makes me cry because I'm really worried about those bikes. But I suppose if they break one of their customers' bikes, that customer will come to me instead, so that's good, I suppose. And then finally, if you do have to clamp it here, there's a very particular technique and a way to do it which is safer than just banging the clamp on randomly. First, get some soft material. An old cloth is a good idea, but make sure you don't layer up the cloth too much, because the more you layer the cloth, the more likely you are to put pressure points into the carbon fiber when you start to close the clamp. Okay, so number one, put some soft material. I like this stuff. It's like packing material foam. I wrap that around the top tube to prevent any scratching before I clamp it. Second thing is I check the pads to make sure there's no metal or grit inside there, because that metal or grit being pushed down into the frame can cause scratching and or damage. And then finally, it's very important the way you actually close the clamp. So this one is a lever, as you can see, and when I open the lever, notice the frame doesn't move. Okay, now the frame doesn't move because it's perfectly balanced. All right, so I've made sure that the back end of the bike and the front end of the bike are balanced right on this point here. Don't push the bike forward so it's uneven on the front, and don't push the bike back so it's more weight towards the back, because that twisting motion that the bike's going to feel when you close the clamp is going to put strain on the top tube. So first, it has to be cradled and balanced. Okay, the second thing is, before you go like this and close the clamp, undo the wing nut underneath, if you have a wing nut on yours, which most of you will, unless of course your clamp closes with a screw like this at the top, which is perfectly fine if it does. So undo the wing nut, yeah, open the clamp, then close it. Now you notice it hasn't clamped down yet, there's still a gap here. That's exactly how you want it. Then take your hand and start turning the wing nut until the jaws of the clamp close, and there you have it. There we go. Once you start to feel a little bit of resistance, then you can stop. Okay, so now the bike, there we are, is clamped. It's secure, but it's not too firm. I'm not putting any excessive pressure on here. I'm literally like as if I was holding it with my hand. I'm just holding it. I'm not trying to crush it. I'm just holding it, and this is just holding onto the bike frame, and that is the way you prevent yourself from breaking it. Because if you do this one up too tight, or you had a thinner bicycle frame in it previously and you accidentally close this clamp, you will literally crush your bike frame as if it was in a vice. Okay, so there we go, 10 minutes video on how to clamp your bicycle and hopefully what not to do. And any comments or suggestions or just general chit chat, let me know in the comments. And as always folks, ride safe. Thanks for watching.